What is your message to J.D. Vance and former President Trump? You support them as the Republican ticket. What is your advice to them about what to do with these allegations about eating pets in Springfield that they keep repeating?
They're very hurtful. It's very hurtful to people. It's hurtful to the people in Springfield. Hurtful to the Haitians who are working every day. I talked to some of their employees. Fran and I had them over for breakfast the other day, the employers, excuse me. And look, they said they work very hard. They're very focused. They're family oriented. It's hurtful for them very, very much. And some of them are afraid.
Hi there, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in New York. As if what was happening to the people of Springfield, Ohio wasn't a deep and lasting enough stain on our nation's dignity or standing in the world. Tonight, new insight into the deep, dark depths of that humiliation, that disgrace, that manufactured, admittedly false controversy that has ended up upending the lives of innocent people living and working in Ohio. Because for the first time this afternoon, the blanks are nearly all filled in. The rumor, then the lie about Haitian immigrants eating family pets has been traced back to its source. And the latest forensic reporting lays bare what so many suspected from the beginning, that the Trump campaign manufactured the match, lit the match, and then poured gasoline on the fire. The Wall Street Journal reports this, that on the morning of September 9th, Springfield City Manager Brian Heck was questioned by a staffer for J.D. Vance about whether there was any truth to the bizarre rumors about Haitian immigrants and pets. From that reporting, quote, he asked point blank, are the rumors true of pets being taken and eaten? I recalled, Heck. I told him no. There was no verifiable evidence or reports to show this was true. I told them these claims were baseless, end quote. By then, J.D. Vance had already posted about the rumors to his 1.9 million followers on X. Yet he kept the post up, and he repeated an even more insistent version of the claim the next morning. Then that night, Donald Trump shared the baseless rumor with 67 million Americans during the presidential debate on the debate stage. Now, dozens of school closures and bomb threats later, the Trump campaign is being asked to explain itself. This afternoon, in response to the Wall Street Journal story, a spokesperson told NBC News this, quote, Senator Vance has received countless messages from residents of Springfield on the disastrous effects of Kamala Harris's immigration policies and that they have created for their hometown. A shortage of affordable housing, stressed public resources, declining public safety, and spikes in communicable disease. It is shameful that the media is ignoring these real concerns while purposely twisting Senator Vance's words. Not much of an apology. Well, note the statement made no denial that the Wall Street Journal reporting is correct. And to stop right here for a second, Donald Trump didn't say any of those things on the debate stage. He said, quote, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Just this afternoon in Raleigh, North Carolina, J.D. Vance debuted a new line of attack against legal immigrants living in Springfield, Ohio, legally.
In the town of Springfield, Ohio, which I'm honored to represent, we've heard from a number of residents that there are certain parts of town where they won't even drive because the illegal immigrants who have come in have made it unsafe to be on the roads.
Again, the vast majority of them here legally. They're all here legally. It's important to remember the way Donald Trump has described immigrants, though, as, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, or calling his domestic opponents, quote, vermin. We'll get further into how closely this latest controversy reads like a page out of an autocrat's playbook later this hour, and what that could portend for a near future should Trump prevail in November. But first, as we approach the end of a life cycle for a lie of Donald Trump, the so what if it's fake chapter of it all, which always comes, remember that like so many other contrived controversies, this was not a victimless endeavor. There are people, children, lives today, right now, as we're on the air, irrevocably changed because Donald Trump and J.D. Vance willingly wanted to lie about immigrants. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Spectrum News national political reporter Taylor Popolars. Did I botch that again? I know we've had you before.
No,
Taylor,
you got it.
Did I get it? We follow you so closely. It's so great to have you back on another huge story. You spent 5 years covering Ohio politics and Ohio politicians. Importantly, you've traveled with J.D. Vance the last few days. Also joining us, editor-at-large for the 19th, host of the podcast, The Amendment, MSNBC political analyst Aaron Haynes is here. And in typical John Heilman fashion, he will fly into the studio any moment. He's, of course, chief political columnist, host of the podcast In Politic for Puck. Taylor, take me through what J.D. Vance has done to his campaign and to the people, more importantly, of Springfield, Ohio.
Well, Nicole, I think that what's really interesting about this story is there are two things to remember. Vance is obviously Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate, and he's traveling the country right now as the GOP vice presidential nominee. But he still also is the junior senator from Ohio. So these are his constituents, everybody who's involved in the community in Springfield. Now, over the course of the last 8 or 9 days since Vance started to make reference to these reported claims that local and state officials say are baseless, to Donald Trump saying it at the debate, neither Vance nor Trump have gone to Springfield. Vance even said when we were following him on the trail yesterday in Michigan and Wisconsin that he wants to go at some point, but he acknowledges that traveling in with a large Secret Service detail and a motorcade might not help out. And even the local mayor has said he doesn't want the major candidates from either party to show up right now because there are so many kind of strains on the community already. But Vance has continued to amplify these claims and continue to insist that he's hearing from constituents who are presenting him with evidence, but his office has not been able to present evidence, or the campaign. When I got to speak with him yesterday when we were on the tarmac in Michigan, I asked him, as a senator for this state, have you been briefed? Have you received data? Have you received intelligence from people who you represent in Ohio to confirm where the bomb threats were coming from, to confirm any evidence there? And he wouldn't directly answer. He instead acknowledged that, as Governor Mike DeWine said earlier this week, that most of the bomb threats came from overseas, not all of them, but most of them. And the Trump and Vance campaign feels that because that happened and most of them were overseas, that they can't in any way be associated with them. But it's important to point out that these threats did not start until after President Trump talked about them on the debate stage, which was one day after Senator Vance started to bring them up. And it's really, though thankfully the bomb threats have been hoaxes, it has really disrupted the community, and it's prompted the state to bring in a lot of resources to try to restore normalcy.
Taylor, there's so much to unpack in what you just laid out. Let me come to you on the Wall Street Journal reporting that J.D. Vance was told from the outset that this was a lie, and the woman whose cat had gone missing found the cat in the basement. So there were never any pets missing. There were never any pets who Haitian immigrants living in Springfield and working in Springfield, Ohio, had eaten, and J.D. Vance knew that the whole time. Just track that for me.
The Wall Street Journal report was very thorough. It came out overnight. And yesterday, when I had the chance to speak with Vance, I asked him directly. I said, the Republican mayor of Springfield, the Republican governor of Ohio, local and state police, even the Ohio Department of Natural Resources is saying we have no evidence to support these claims. So I said to him, what are you basing these off of? And what he told me, in essence, is that his office continues to hear from people in Ohio who are making these claims. And he told me that he wants to believe them, even if they're lying to him. He said he chooses to believe them right now over the press and over these other officials because he views that there's some seriousness to these claims. At the same time, Nicole, there is a very legitimate story about the struggles that Springfield has been facing as these 15,000 plus migrants have come into the community. The schooling system, the local medical facilities, even traffic patterns have been disrupted by this influx. It's not a large community, about 60,000 people before all the migrants showed up. And Vance argues that there should be more reporting on that. Local journalists, including my Spectrum colleagues based in Ohio, have covered that over the last year. But then this obviously ballooned when he and Trump started pushing these unfounded claims. And he still won't point to direct evidence, just saying he keeps hearing it from people. And he says there's a dozen claims that he's heard from folks. And according to him, 10 are verifiable and confirmable. But he even told me yesterday that yesterday morning, his office heard from somebody who was speaking to a member of the press. But he said, I'm not going to tell you who that is. But they were confirming that they saw this. So it's been hard to pin him down on this, but he says he's going to press forward because, according to him, he keeps hearing from his constituents, despite what these officials say.
So he has 10 officials. I'm sorry to sort of belabor the point. I want to understand it. So in J.D. Vance's mind, he has 10 officials who will talk to only J.D. Vance, but not the Republican Trump backing governor or the Republican Trump backing city manager. Just him?
That's where it's a little tough. And I should clarify, not 10 officials. He's saying that his office has heard from 10 people who have
10
presented.
dead pets.
12 people, and what he claims are verifiable and confirmable claims. But his office or the campaign has not presented evidence of that. And as you alluded to, the city officials, from the city manager to the Republican mayor to the Ohio governor, say they have no track record of this. Local police have even gone back through 11 months of 911 calls and reports and haven't been able to piece together what Vance is continuing to claim. So as the senator for that state, much less the Republican Party's vice presidential nominee, it's pretty fascinating that he continues to lean into this and push into this despite the fact-checking from the local officials on the ground.